two-parter. I usually do a review and go back through what happened the week before, but this one is dense-packed, and there just doesn't seem to be time to do that. So we're not going to shorten it, but we are going to work on it. We're going to go straight into part 2 of Oops, I Changed My Mind. And we're going to go into it by hearing what God said from the beginning. That's the best way to do it. First, from the Apostle James concerning the stability of God. Let's go to James, the 1st chapter, the 17th verse, and you'll begin to see how we're building this and what's happening. James, the 1st chapter, the 17th verse, where it says, every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights, with whom is no variableness nor shadow of turning. In other words, it's not going to change. The gauntlet is further thrown down in Hebrews, the 13th chapter, the 8th verse. Hebrews, the 13th chapter, the 8th verse, where it says, Yeshua Messiah, the same yesterday and today and forever. And some people like 3 witnesses, so you go to Malachi, the 3rd chapter, the 6th verse. Malachi, the 3rd chapter, the 6th verse, where it says, I am Yahweh, I change not. Because of this, you sons of Jacob are not destroyed or consumed, you may know. From the days of your fathers, you have turned away from my statutes and have not kept them. Return to me, and I will return to you, says Yahweh of hosts. If you say, go, go, what way? What way should we return, they asked. They were beginning an argument, and that's where we'll cut off. So you see, this turning away from the law of God has always been. It didn't start in the modern age. Here, Yahweh says that even the Israelites, from the beginning, as we have often seen, always turned away from the law and went their own way. It would take quite a while to dig in and find all of the places historically where God's people veered away from him. But instead of this, we choose to stay on point. We come back to the original question, which was, how did this change take place? This substituting of Sunday for Sabbath or Saturday as the day of worship, and the replacement of God's holy days with pagan holidays such as Easter, Christmas, and so forth. This is probably one of the most disturbing and divisive religious questions among thinking Christians today. Unfortunately, the issue is seldom examined publicly for reasons that are spiritually embarrassing and cast a truly dark shadow on the obedience of modern religion and the denominational system currently in religious power. If you don't think that there's a denominational system in place, notice when they have funerals on television, who is usually over those funerals? It's usually Catholics. If it's not, they're usually not national broadcast. You might have a local feed, but if you want to go from 2, 5, 7, 9 Fox to see something as a funeral, 9 times out of 10 it's going to be of Catholic origin. There's a reason for that. Now, many have wondered when, how, and why the change came about. Many more have been turned out of churches for even asking the question. But these brave men and women, not realizing it, were asking sound questions that honestly deserved answers. Why? One very simple reason. Because there is no change documented in the scriptures? None. In both the Old and New Testaments, there is not a shadow of variation in the doctrine of the Sabbath. Biblically, sunset Friday to sunset Saturday is the only day ever designed or designated by the term Sabbath in the entire Bible. Yeshua was a perfect example in observing the weekly Sabbath, as did all of his disciples, and they all followed the same pattern long after Yeshua had been martyred and returned to the Father in heaven, reclaiming his divinity and his position as our high priest according to the original priesthood of Melchizedek. With the entire New Testament replete with stories of believers, Hebrew and Gentile, worshiping on the Sabbath and keeping the holy days. This change is the oddest element of modern Christianity, or what some call churchianity, because it doesn't seem to be centered around Christ. And few dare to challenge it openly. But we are constantly questioned and challenged as to why we so fully obey this word of God. We are tagged as cultists, told that we're reading the book improperly, and maybe there's an educational issue in terms of our approach. And we're sometimes shunned by our own physical families, who somehow have never found through, they say they read the book, but as I said, I usually find it as a dust catcher on the back shelf of the car. And somehow the few that do read it, they seem as if they've never found the disparity in their own worship systems. They don't see that it's right there. It's the most plain secret. It's plain, right? It's right there in plain sight, but no one sees it. Or maybe they just don't want to go and ask the question. Yet for all of their other rebellion and other refusal of the acceptance of Yeshua as their Messiah, even the Jewish religion has always kept the Sabbath at the proper time throughout history. The Apostle Paul, who wrote pages of counsel about lesser issues of Jewish and Gentile conflict, had not one word to say about any controversy over the day of worship. Not one. Circumcision he's talking of. Foods offered to idols, and other Jewish customs that were readily challenged by early Gentile believers in the church, but the weightier matter of weekly worship was never argued. Never argued, at least not as an issue. Some did it, but just to be grumblers, I guess you could say. Why? Simply this: no change was made. No change was made from the historic seventh day of Old Testament times, and from creation itself, this custom sprang. Had there been an attempted switch from the Sabbath to the first day of the week, you can be sure the controversy would have been most explosive, especially among Jewish converts. But more than any other controversy, this would have been earth-shaking in its scope, especially to those Jewish believers and converts to Yeshua's way, the way he taught. Even from the beginning, there were physical Jews who followed Yeshua. I'm thinking perhaps it's time to consider the origins of time and the Sabbath and see that they are both rooted in the creation. Now, this is a standard observation that I'm sure we've all heard before, but it's well worth making. You see, God's final work of creation was to rest from all the work that he had done. The Sabbath is rooted in the creation itself. By God's own example, the days and events were all recorded in Genesis. By numbered days, only the Sabbath was eventually given a non-numbered name. Notice this, Genesis, the first chapter, the third verse. Like I said, this is old ground, but it's good to go over these things just to make sure we understand where we stand. Genesis, the first chapter, the 3rd verse, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light that it was good, and God divided between the light and the darkness, and God called the light day, and he called the darkness night. Don't miss this. And the evening and the morning were the first day. Let's go down to verse 7. Now let's go to chapter 1, go to verse 7. I'll make that chapter 7, verse 8. Chapter 7, verse 8. Skip around a little bit. It's here. This is kind of what they mean when they say here and there a little and there a little. It's scattered there for you to look around and find it, but if you read the whole thing, it comes to you. But we try to make it a little bit easier and just put it all together so you have it all in one place. Genesis, the first chapter, the 7th verse. And God made the expanse and divided the waters which were under the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse. Now, some people think that that's the clouds, but no. The ones before the expanse were the oceans. The ones above it were the canopy that went around the earth. Some people will tell you they've never heard that because it's explained differently when other groups explain it. That there was a canopy above the earth that protected us from the sun's harmful rays, and that's why the soil got the beauty and grooming that it got, so that when you planted things, they were much larger. When you ate them, they were much more healthy for you because of that canopy, which is no longer there. Just the ozone layer is left of that. And it doesn't do nearly the job that the canopy did. Verse 8, and God called the expanse heavens, and the evening and the morning were the second day. Now let's go to Genesis, the first chapter, the 12th verse. Go down to 12. And the earth brought forth tender sprouts, the herb yielding seed after its kind, and the tree producing fruit after its kind, whose seed was in itself. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. Genesis 1, go to 16. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the smaller light to rule the night. And the stars also, and God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide between the light and the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. In Genesis 1, let's go down to verse 21. And God created great sea animals and every living soul that creeps, with which the water swarmed after their kind, and every winged fowl after its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters of the seas, and let the fowl multiply in the earth. And the evening and the morning were the fifth day. Let's go down to verse 30. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the heavens, and to every creeper on the earth, which has in it a living soul, every green plant is for food. Another thing that people just skip right over. What he's telling you is we all should be vegetarians. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. Now, as a review, the first day was the day of God's creation in the heavens and the earth. On the second day, God created the earth's sky and atmosphere. On the third day, God created the land, the oceans, and all the plants and foliage. On the fourth day, God created the sun, moon, and stars. On the fifth day, he created the birds, fish, and other sea creatures. On the sixth day, God created all the land animals and people. Then we come to the day in question. Genesis, the second chapter, the first verse. Genesis, the second chapter, the first verse, where it says, "And the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made. And he rested on that seventh day from all the work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he had rested from all his work which God created to make." The institution cannot be done away with either the fall of man or by the differing worldly views of the covenants which God administered through grace. You see, the Sabbath, the Eternal declared, was his test commandment. He even set up a test to see if the newly freed Israelites would obey it. This conclusion cannot be mistaken unless the reader is veiled. There has to be something there that keeps them from getting this and understanding it. There has to be something there that makes them see something other than what's actually on the page, because the page is very clear. God instituted it 1 month after their release from Egyptian slavery. Let's go to Exodus, the 16th chapter, the first verse. I do it this way because it makes more sense, and because if you read it through, you see it very clearly. Exodus, the 16th chapter, the first verse, where it says, "And they pulled up stakes from Elim, and all the congregation of the sons of Israel came into the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai. On the 15th day of the second month, after they're going out from the land of Israel." As you know, that was the second month because they came out in the first, which is how he started the year. These things are fundamental in our understanding, and these things have not changed even now. You go back, and there are studies we've done where we show that the year doesn't start in January. It should start in either March or April, depending on how it falls. But these things, the world says, "Oh no, we control this. How dare you say that we're doing things wrong? You were always doing it wrong. That's why you don't understand that it's wrong, because it was wrong before you were ever born. You were born into a world that you never made, but you tried to make of it what you would, not the way it should be." Verse 2. "And all the congregation of the sons of Israel murmured against Moses." Already? Yeah. "Murmured against Moses and against Aaron in the wilderness, and the sons of Israel said to them, What would that we had died in the hand of Yahweh in the land of Egypt, in our sitting by the flesh pots, in our eating bread to satisfaction, for you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill all the assembly with hunger. And Yahweh said to Moses, Behold, I am. Bread will rain from the heavens for you. And the people shall go out and gather the matter of a day in its day, so that I may test them whether they will walk in my law or not. And it shall be on the sixth day that they shall prepare what they bring in, and it shall be double what they gather day by day. In other words, whatever you gather day by day, on the sixth day, gather twice as much, because something's going to happen on the seventh. And Moses and Aaron said to all the sons of Israel, At evening you shall know that Yahweh has brought you from the land of Egypt. And in the morning you shall see the glory of Yahweh. In his hearing your murmurings against Yahweh. And we, what were we? Does anybody notice that? How can Yahweh hear the bleatings and whining against Yahweh. Are we dealing with two individuals possibly? Just something to think about. At evening you shall know that Yahweh has brought you out from the land of Egypt, and in the morning you shall see the glory of Yahweh, in his hearing your murmurings against Yahweh. And we, what are we that you murmur against us? And Moses said, when Yahweh gives you flesh to eat in the morning and bread in the morning to satisfaction, when Yahweh hears your murmuring, which you are murmuring against him, you will see. And what are we? Your murmurings are not against us, but against Yahweh. And Moses spoke to Aaron, say to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, come near before Yahweh, for he has heard your murmurings. And it happened as Aaron was speaking to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, and they turned toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of Yahweh appeared in the cloud. And Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, I have heard the murmurings of the sons of Israel. Speak to them, saying, between the evenings you shall eat flesh, and in the morning you shall be satisfied with bread. And you shall know that I am Yahweh your God. And it happened on the evening that quail came up and covered the camp. And when he says covered, he means covered. There was so much there they couldn't walk for it. And the quail came up and covered the camp, and in the morning a layer of dew was around the camp. And the layer of dew went up, and behold, something small was on the face of the wilderness, scale-like, small like the hoarfrost of the earth. And the sons of Israel looked, and they said each one to another, what is that? For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, this is the bread which Yahweh has given to you for food. This is the thing that Yahweh commanded. Gather from it, each one according to the mouth of his eating, an omer for a head. But the number of your souls you shall take for each man who is in your tent. And so the sons of Israel did, and they gathered. The one gathered much, and the one gathered little, and they measured with an omer. And the one gathering much did not have too much, and the one gathering little didn't have any need. Each one gathered according to the mouth of his eating. And Moses said to them, do not let anyone leave from it until morning. In other words, eat it all tonight or else. And they did not listen to Moses, and some left some. Oh, I'll go eat some in the morning. And it became rotten with maggots and stunk. And Moses was angry against them, and they gathered it in the morning, each one in the morning according to the mouth of his eating, and it melted in the heat of the sun. And it came about on the 6th day, they gathered double bread, 2 omers for one, and all the leaders of the congregation came and reported to Moses, and he said to them, this is what Yahweh said, tomorrow is a rest, a holy Sabbath to Yahweh. What you will bake, bake, and boil what you will boil, and lay up for yourselves all that is left over to keep it until the morning. And they laid it up until the morning as Moses commanded, and it did not stink, and no maggot was in it. And Moses said, eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to Yahweh. Today you will not find it in the field. You shall gather it 6 days, and on the 7th is a Sabbath, and in it none shall be found. And it happened on the 7th day, some of the people always do. There's always one. Some of the people went out together and did not find any. And Yahweh said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? Behold, because Yahweh has given the Sabbath to you, therefore he is giving to you 2 days of bread on the 6th day. Each one of you remain in his place. Do not let anyone go out from this place on the 7th day. And the people rested on the seventh day, and the house of Israel called its name manna. This stuff that they were eating. Amazing that, notice the taste. And it was like the seed of coriander, white, and its taste like cakes with honey. Ooh, that sounds good to me. This is amazing. He sent them a bread that had the natural consistency for fiber and also had a pleasant, sweet taste. No matter, the people still complained and whined of Moses and Aaron. It's evident from this and other Old Testament stories that Yahweh took his Sabbaths, including the annual Sabbaths and sabbatical years, seriously enough to punish Israel and Judah for not keeping them. Few modern believers seem confused about the Sabbath regarding Israel. They understand that they even call it the Jewish Sabbath. Many of the modern Bibles errantly reference the Sabbath and the holy days as Jewish days, adding to the general confusion. But what does God Almighty say about them? Let's go to Exodus, the 31st chapter, the 13th verse. Exodus, the 31st chapter, the 13th verse, where it says, "Speak also to the sons of Israel, saying, truly you shall keep my Sabbaths." Whenever it's plural, he's talking about not only the Sabbath, but the holy days. "Truly you shall keep my Sabbaths, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations to know that I am Yahweh who sanctifies you." Need more? Ezekiel. Let's go to Ezekiel, the 20th chapter, the 12th verse. Ezekiel, the 20th chapter, the 12th verse, where it says, "And I gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between them and me, that they might know that I am Yahweh who sets them apart." And there are more. But what about the Sabbath in the New Testament? Did the Messiah, Yeshua, observe the Sabbath? Some say, oh, well, yeah, but. But this is what I'm talking about. It's right there in plain sight. And for some reason, they don't get it, as plain as it is. Luke, the 4th chapter, the 14th verse. Luke, the 4th chapter, the 14th verse. "And Yeshua returned in the power of the Spirit into Galilee, and a report went out throughout all the neighborhood concerning him, and he taught in their synagogues, being glorified by all. And he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, and as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up to read." It says, as his custom was. We know what a custom is. That means this is something that you do regularly. If you're here for 8 weeks and there are 8 Sabbaths, if it's your custom, every Sabbath he shows up at the synagogue. So this isn't some one-off thing and people say, oh, he just did it once. No, it was his custom. It was what he did regularly. It's what the family was. It was how they were taught. It's how they were raised. And what's fascinating about that, it was different than what the other Jews did. They went to the same synagogue, but he did not work from under the auspices of the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the scribes. It was a whole different thing. And a lot of people get tripped up on that. They automatically assume that Judaism was the faith of Yeshua. No, it wasn't. Mark, the 1st chapter, the 21st verse. Mark, the 1st chapter, the 21st verse. "And they went into Capernaum, and immediately on the Sabbath day," you start to see a pattern here. "He entered into the synagogue and taught." So not only
was he going there to worship? He was teaching. Why was he teaching? If they already knew if what the Pharisees and the scribes were teaching was correct, why would he teach something different? Either of two things were true, and we find out that the latter is the case. Either their teaching was wrong, or he knew their teaching was wrong, but he knew that there was some things right there, so that he felt the need to correct them. And that's what happened. And notice the reaction, verse 22. And they were astonished at his doctrine, for he taught them as one who had authority, and not like the scribes, where, well, the father said this, or the sages said this. No, he says, I say. He said it with authority, which drew attention to him, caused some problems for him. But you see, what has further confused many Bible believers and readers who have no teacher or person to make them understand that which can be understood in this, which is quite a bit, as we can see. Nearly every encounter between Yeshua and the Pharisees found them accusing him somehow of breaking or disrespecting the Sabbath. No, but let's understand what he's talking about here. Luke, the 13th chapter, the 10th verse. Luke, the 13th chapter, the 10th verse, where it says, and he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, and behold, there was a woman who had a spirit of infirmity, 18 years. And she was bowed together, and she was not able to be completely erect. She couldn't stand up straight. And when Yeshua saw her, he called and said to her, woman, you are delivered from your infirmity. And he laid his hands on her, and instantly she was made erect. And she glorified God, and answering the synagogue ruler, being angry, what? Woman had been bent over for 18 years. He touches her, and she goes up straight as an arrow and begins to what would happen orally if that happened to you? Dance. Yes. You dance. And we dance with you. And answering the synagogue ruler, being angry because Yeshua had healed on the Sabbath day, said to the crowd, there are 6 days in which it is right to work. Therefore, in them, come and be healed, and not on the Sabbath day. And the Lord answered him and said, hypocrite, does not each one of you on the Sabbath loosen your ox or your ass from the stall and lead it away to give it drink? And ought not this woman, being a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has bound lo these 18 years, be loosened from his bond on the Sabbath day? And when he had said these things, all his adversaries were ashamed. They should have been, if they weren't. And all the people rejoiced for all the glorious things that were done by him. You see, Yeshua was not breaking God's Sabbath. He was, in their eyes, breaking the rules and injunctions added to the Torah by the additional 613 or so rules of the Talmud. These rules were, and still are, a large part of Judaism. But Yeshua was not a part of this and actively went against these rules. This is why the high priest, Pharisees, and scribes sought actively to eliminate Yeshua from Judea. The people's claim of him as their Messiah, as some did, could cause problems with the high priest's legal and financial dealings with Rome and the Caesars. You hear about these things because they were dealing with them. And you have to understand that there has to be a separation of God and state. I didn't say church and state. I said God and state. And as you all see, there is a difference. This confusion also has led most of Christendom to believe that the Sabbath is a Jewish thing. Yet there are other mitigating factors that maybe factor into our inability to deal with this, and other people refusing to factor in these things to their spiritual equation, either in an attempt to keep them hidden and make Christianity appear less like other engineered religions, Islam, and other engineered religions. I won't go there. But there were some things that happened that had to be dealt with. Number one, we talked about it last week, the war that Constantine fought at Milvian Bridge. The violent force of Emperor Constantine. Last week we've dealt with his Milvian Bridge incident where he claimed that he saw the cross in the sky and sent his men out to war with it painted on their shields. According to church historians writing after his death, notice they didn't write these things until he was dead. Please note that. According to church historians writing after his death, Constantine converted to Christianity and was baptized on his deathbed, thus making him the first Christian emperor. There are no known contemporary documents that attest to an earlier intention to become a member of the church. Constantine was baptized by Eusebius of Nicomedia, bishop of the city where he lay dying. Called him in at the last minute, said, "Baptize me." So he was sprinkled on his deathbed by the bishop of Nicomedia. Constantine, though he made his alleged new allegiance clear, he did not outlaw paganism. In the words of an early edict, he decreed that polytheists, or worshipers of different gods, could celebrate the rites of an outmoded illusion so long as they didn't force Christians to join them. But when you leave that door open, what happens when you're gone? We're going to make them do it. And that's what the Catholics did. They just changed the names. In a letter to the king of Persia, Constantine wrote how he shunned the abominable blood and hateful odors of pagan sacrifices. But instead, he wanted them to worship the high God on bended knee. And in the new capital city he built, you've heard of Constantinople. Of course he named it after himself. Of course he did. Constantine made sure that there were no pagan temples built in Constantinople. And everybody trips when they go there and see no pagan symbols, no pagan temples, because it's the only place, but they were everywhere else. Constantine would sporadically prohibit public sacrifice and close pagan temples, but very little pressure, however, was put on individual pagans. And notice, from Constantinople, there were no pagan martyrs. Later recorded history proves the false nature of Constantine's conversion and proved that he only accepted Christianity in order to enlarge his kingdom. And there is one other little detail that we've talked about before that might cause some people to not quickly accept a Jewish Sabbath. The Jewish hatred of Martin Luther. We've heard this. Luther had a significant influence on German anti-Semitism by his virulent anti-Jewish statements and writings, the hatred of the Jews, for one. He is noted as a major influence on Adolf Hitler. The prevailing view among historians is that Luther's anti-Jewish rhetoric contributed significantly to the development of anti-Semitism in Germany, especially in the 30s and the 40s, and provided an ideal foundation for the Nazi Party's attacks against Jews and their eventual attempt to eliminate them from the planet. Reinhold Levin writes that whoever wrote against the Jews for whatever reason believed he had the right to justify himself by triumphantly referring to Martin Luther as doing the same. Many continue to this day to rail against not being a Jew when given the scriptures that prove that all believers and followers of Yeshua are spiritual Israelites, including converted blood Hebrews who accept Messiah. The final result of this negative Christian attitude is the prevalent concept of replacement theology. How many of you have heard of replacement theology? Let's see some hands. Replacement theology is this, and it is rampant in Christian denominations. If you hang out with evangelicals, you'll hear about replacement theology. This is the belief that Christians have replaced Jewish believers, and God now only works with Jewish believers through being converted to Christianity. Which means that God has tossed away his law. Because if he's working with them through Christianity, he doesn't keep his law anymore. Oops, I changed my mind. This is untrue. God does not change. God does not make mistakes. Nor does he gain converts through violence and force, as with the Crusades of the Catholics or the Ottoman invasions in Europe in early Islam, or the lunacy of ISIS presently rampant in the world. God does not change his mind. He simply finds a clearer way to explain himself to those of a mind to hear him in the direst of circumstances. Those who believe that a Christianity stripped of God's commandments can replace God in the minds of Jews to whom his law was given is more proof of the prevaricant or lying nature of both dispensation and denomination. In the Bible, time marches on, and there is only one worship of one almighty Godhead. God proved replacement theology as a lie through the Apostle Paul. Let's go to Romans, the 11th chapter. We'll go through the whole thing and try to make it make sense, because it does. Romans, the 11th chapter, the first verse where it says, I say then, did not God thrust away his people? Let it not be. For I also am an Israelite, out of Abraham's seed, of the tribe of Benjamin. God did not thrust away his people, whom he foreknew. Or do you not know that Scripture said in Elijah, how he pleaded with God against Israel, saying, Lord, they killed your prophets, and they dug down your altars, and I am only left, and they seek my life. But what does the divine answer say to him? I reserved to myself 7,000 men who did not bow a knee to Baal. So then also in the present time, a remnant, according to the election of grace, has come into being. But if by grace no longer is it of works, else grace no longer becomes grace. But if of works, it is no longer grace. challenging one against the other. And each one believes in the other, but he's using both in his time. Yet else work is no longer work. What then? What Israel seeks, this it did not obtain. But the election obtained it, that would be the believers, and the rest were hardened. In other words, those who accepted Christ of Jewish blood obtained it, and the others were hardened. Even as it has been written, God gave to them a spirit of slumber, eyes not seeing and ears not hearing, until this day. And David said, let their table become for a snare and a trap, and for a stumbling block and a repayment to them. Let their eyes be darkened, not to see, and their backs always bowing. I say then, did not they stumble that they fall? Let it not be. But by their slipping away came salvation to the nations, or the Gentiles, or the Goyim, or us, to provoke them, Judaism, to jealousy. But if their slipping away is the riches of the world and the default, the riches of the nations, how much more their fullness? In other words, if they fell away in order to pull you in, with all of us out there working toward bringing them in at the right time, how much more full will there be in their time? 13. For I speak to you, the nations, since I am an apostle of the nations. I glorify my ministry. If somehow I may provoke to jealousy my flesh or my people and may save some of them. For if their casting away is the reconciliation of the world, what is the reception except life from the dead? The indication here is that both will be raised. The ones who are raised first are the ones who accepted Christ before their deaths or while they were alive. And the second, and this is when most of them will come up, in the second resurrection. For if their casting away is the reconciliation of the world, what is the reception except life from the dead? Now, if the first fruit is holy, first resurrection, so also the lump, those who didn't get it right away. And if the root is holy, so also the branches. But if some of the branches were broken off, and you, being a wild olive tree, were grafted in among them and became a sharer of the root and the fatness of the olive tree, do not boast against the branches, as everybody does. Oh, we're in Jesus. They have to come through us. No, they don't. They get their own deal. Don't blow your own tripping on them. Do not boast against the branches, but if you do boast, it is not you that bears the root, but the root bears you. You will say then, the branches were broken off, and I might be grafted in. Well, for unbelief they were broken off. And you stand by faith, a faith that now says the law is done away. I'd be careful. And you stand by faith. Do not be high-minded, but fear. For if God did not spare the natural branches, fear that it may be he will not spare you either. Something to think about while you're saying that the law is done away, saying that the Sabbath is done away, or believing those who tell you that. Behold then the kindness and severity of God on those having fallen. Severity, but on you, kindness, if you continue in the kindness. In other words, if you keep following his law. Otherwise, you will also be cut off. And those also, if they do not continue in unbelief, will be grafted in. For God is able to graft them in again. For if you were cut off from the natural wild olive tree and against nature were grafted into a good olive tree, how much more then these being accorded the nature will be grafted into their own olive tree. In other words, you went away because you fell away, but you'll be grafted in, not to something new, but into something you left in the first place. For I do not want you to be ignorant of this mystery, brothers, so that you may not be wise within yourselves, that hardness in part has happened to Israel until the fullness of the nations come in. And all Israel will be saved. Even as it is written, the deliverer will come out of Zion, and he will turn away ungodliness from Jacob. And this is my covenant with them when I take away their sins. Now, does that mean that everybody is going to get in? No. But it means that everyone will get a fair chance. Talking about the Jews now. We're getting our chance now, so we'd best get it right. 28. Indeed, as regards the gospel, one's hostile towards you, but as regard the election, beloved for the sake of the fathers. For the free gifts and the calling of God are unregrettable. And as you then also disobeyed God, but now have obtained mercy by the disobedience of these, so also these now have disobeyed, so that they also may obtain mercy by your mercy. For God shut up all disobedience, that he may show mercy to all. Oh, the depths of the riches of the wisdom and the knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments, and how his ways past finding out. For who has known the mind of God? Or who became his counselor? Or who first gave to him, and it will be repaid to him? Because of him and through him and through him are all things. To him be the glory forever. Now, one other little thing that maybe might explain why so many have so much trouble with the Sabbath. I ran across something about 20 years ago, and I went back and looked at it, and I wonder how many people see this and now they think it's a gimmick. Now, this letter was written by the Catholic Church in 1869. I'm not going to read it all, I'm just going to read the salient points, but we've probably heard of it, at least the deeper diggers have found this. I've got the whole thing here, but I can't read it all. It's about 12 pages, but we'll read the parts that make sense, and you'll begin to understand why so many have so much trouble making a decision. This is from, it didn't even say which pope it was. But 1869, we can go back and figure it out. I am going to propose a very plain and serious question to those who follow the Bible and the Bible only. To give their most earnest attention, it is this: why do you not keep the Sabbath day? The command of Almighty God stands clearly written in the Bible in these words. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shall you labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work. And again, 6 days shall work be done. But on the seventh day there shall be unto you an holy day, a Sabbath of rest to the Lord. Whosoever does work therein shall be put to death. This is from the Catholic Church. Keep that in your mind. This is from the Pope in 1869. Keep that in your mind. How strict and precise is God's commandment upon this head in this matter? No work whatever was to be done on that day, which he had chosen to set apart for himself and to make holy. And accordingly, when the children of Israel found a man that gathered sticks upon that Sabbath day, the Lord said unto Moses, the man shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him with stones without the camp. You find this in Numbers 15:32 if you want to look for it. Such being God's command, then I ask again, why do you not obey it? Why do you not keep the Sabbath day holy? This is a Catholic Pope now. But Sunday is not the Sabbath day. Sunday is the first day of the week. The Sabbath day is the seventh day of the week. Almighty God did not give a commandment that men should keep holy one day in seven. We've heard this so many times. The best argument comes from the ones that made you do it. God did not give a commandment that men should keep holy one day in seven, but he named his own day and said distinctly, you shall keep holy the seventh day. And he assigned a reason for choosing this day rather than any other day, a reason which belongs only to the seventh day of the week and cannot be applied to any of the rest. He says, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth and sea and all that is in them and rested in the seventh day. We just read that. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. This is the priest. This is the Catholic Pope. Almighty God ordered that all men should rest from their labor on the seventh day. If you're going through that, he went through that and explained more about it. Now get this. You will tell me that Saturday was the Jewish Sabbath. God gave the Bible Sabbath to mankind 2,000 years before the first Jew existed. But that the Christian Sabbath has been changed to Sunday. But by whom? Who has the authority to change and express commandment of Almighty God when God has spoken and said, you shall keep the seventh day holy? And who shall dare to say, nay, you may work and do all manner of work? And then they come right out and say, yeah, we did it. We did it. You all left in protest. You left in protest. So why not come back? Because we were the only ones that had the authority to make such an order. Had it happened otherwise, had one of the other reformers taken it into his head to denounce the observance of Sunday as a popish corruption and superstition and to insist upon it that Saturday was that day, he would have never been authorized the observance of any other. All Protestants would have been obliged in obedience to their man. So why do you follow us if you're not of us? They even, if you read in the Bible, it even talks about the protesting daughters who came out of her. So every Protestant can read this and say, gee, we're all wrong. But get this is the key. What I do quarrel with you for is your inconsistency in occasionally acting on a true principle such as Roman Catholic Sunday keeping. But your adoption as a general rule of a false one, your Protestant refusal to accept the rest of Roman traditional teachings such as the Mass, the veneration of saints, you keep the Sunday and not Saturday. And you do so rightly, for this was the practice of all Christians when Protestantism began. Catholic leaders erroneously say they were Protestants prior to the 16th century, but you have abandoned other Catholic observances which were equally universal at that day. That's a spanking. You basically say, hey, you all are doing what we told you to do, and then you want to run from us and say that we're wrong. We blame you not for making Sunday your weekly holy day instead of Saturday, but for rejecting tradition, the sayings of the popes and the councils of Rome, which is the only safe and clear rule by which this observance of Sunday can be justified. An outward act We do the same as yourselves in this matter, but we, too, no longer observe the Sabbath but Sunday in its stead. But there is this important difference between us, that we do not pretend, as you do, to derive our authority for so doing from a book called the Bible. But we Catholics derive it from a living teacher, and the teacher is the Roman Catholic Church. You see, even the Catholic Church claims that it only has the power to change the eternal edict of the law and the Sabbath. Well, if you believe their lies, feel free to continue in your Sunday worship and risk losing it all in the true day of the Lord. As for me, in this house, in my house, I like the way Joshua put it. Joshua, the 24th chapter, the 15th verse, and we'll close out here because we're pretty much 5 minutes over time. Joshua, the 24th chapter, the 15th verse, where it says in it, if it seems evil in your eyes to serve Yahweh, choose for yourselves today whom you will serve, whether the gods whom your fathers served beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in those lands where you're living. But as for me and my house, we will serve Yahweh. God bless you all.